the woman in red. Jack stepped out of the elevator and into the dimly lit hallway of the high-rise building. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. This wasn't his first rodeo, but he knew that every case was different, and he had to be prepared for anything. He approached the door of Salvator's penthouse suite and knocked. After a few moments, the door opened to reveal a tall, imposing figure, Salvator himself. He was a man in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to bore into Jack's soul. "Come in, Jack," Salvator said in a deep, gravelly voice. Jack followed Salvator into the opulent living room, taking in the plush leather couches and the expensive artwork adorning the walls. He knew that Salvator was a man of great wealth and power, but he tried not to let it intimidate him. Salvator poured them both a glass of whiskey and gestured for Jack to sit down. Jack obliged, taking a sip of the amber liquid and settling back into the comfortable couch. "I have a job for you, Jack," Salvator said, getting straight to the point. "Okay," Jack said, nodding. "What kind of job?" "One of my men has stolen a large sum of money from the organization," Salvator said, his voice dripping with anger. "I need you to find out who it was and bring them to me." Jack knew that this was not going to be an easy task. Salvator's organization was notorious for its secrecy and its willingness to silence anyone who crossed them. But he also knew that he needed the money. He was running low on cash and needed a new case to keep him afloat. "I can do that," Jack said, trying to sound confident. Salvator leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I need this done quickly, Jack. The longer this goes on, the more damage it does to my organization." "I understand," Jack said, nodding. "Good," Salvator said, sitting back in his chair. "I'll provide you with all the information you need. And Jack, don't disappoint me." With that, Salvator stood up and walked towards the door, leaving Jack alone in the living room. Jack finished his drink and stood up, his mind already racing with the possibilities of what this case could entail. Jack left Salvator's penthouse suite, his mind already working on the case. He knew that he needed to start investigating right away, but he also knew that he had to be careful. Salvator's organization was not to be taken lightly, and he didn't want to end up on their bad side. He made his way down the elevator and out of the building, hailing a cab to take him to his office. As he rode through the city streets, he thought about where to start his investigation. He knew that he needed to start with Salvator's inner circle, those closest to the stolen money. But he also knew that they wouldn't be easy to crack. They were loyal to Salvator and wouldn't betray him easily. When he arrived at his office, he sat down at his desk and began to go over the information that Salvator had given him. He sifted through the names of Salvator's associates, trying to find any connections or patterns that could lead him to the thief. He spent the next few hours poring over the information, taking notes and making connections. As the sun began to set outside, he realized that he had been so engrossed in his work that he had forgotten to eat. He picked up the phone and ordered a pizza, knowing that he needed to keep his strength up for what was to come. As he waited for the pizza to arrive, he began to make a plan. He would start with Salvator's closest associates and work his way outward, looking for any signs of the stolen money. He knew that it would be a long and difficult road, but he was determined to see it through. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Jack got up from his desk and went to answer it, expecting to see the pizza delivery man. But when he opened the door, he was met with a surprise. Standing on his doorstep was a beautiful woman, with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She wore a red dress that clung to her curves and a look of desperation on her face. "Can I help you?" Jack asked, trying to keep his cool. The woman stepped forward and whispered in his ear, "I need your help. My husband is in trouble, and I don't know where else to turn." Jack knew that he shouldn't get involved with this woman. It was a surefire way to get into trouble. But something about her pulled at him, and he found himself saying yes before he even realized it. Jack stepped back and gestured for the woman to come in. She walked past him, and he couldn't help but notice the way her dress swayed with every step she took. He closed the door behind her and turned to face her. "What kind of trouble is your husband in?" "He owes money to some dangerous people," she said, wringing her hands. "And they're going to hurt him if he doesn't pay up." Jack knew that this was not his problem, but he couldn't ignore the fear in the woman's eyes. "Who does he owe the money to?" The woman gave him a name, one that Jack recognized as belonging to a rival of Salvador's organization. He knew that getting involved with this could put him in even more danger, but he also knew that he couldn't turn away someone in need. "I'll see what I can do," he said, and the woman breathed a sigh of relief. As they talked, Jack took in the details of the woman's appearance, the way her hair fell in loose waves around her face, the way her eyes darted around nervously. He couldn't deny that he was attracted to her, but he also knew that he needed to keep his distance. He told her to wait in his office while he made a few calls, and she nodded, taking the seat on his couch. Jack walked over to his desk and picked up the phone, dialing one of his contacts. He spent the next hour on the phone, gathering information and making deals. By the time he hung up, he had a plan in place to help the woman's husband. But he also knew that he was in deep. He had crossed Salvador's organization, and there was no telling how they would react. He walked back over to the couch and sat down next to the woman. "I'll help you," he said, his voice firm. "But you need to understand that this is dangerous. You could be putting yourself in harm's way." "I know," she said, her eyes locked on his. "But I don't have a choice." Jack knew that he had to protect her, no matter what. He reached out and took her hand, feeling a jolt of electricity as their skin touched. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Jack stood up, his hand still clasping the woman's, and went to answer it. When he opened the door, he was met with a group of men, Salvador's men. They had come for him. Jack's heart sank as he took in the sight of Salvador's men standing in his doorway. He knew that he was in trouble. "Jack," one of the men said, his voice cold and menacing. "We need to talk." Jack tightened his grip on the woman's hand and stepped back, pulling her with him. "What is this about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Salvador's men didn't answer. Instead, they pushed past Jack and barged into his office. Jack followed them, the woman close behind. The men spread out around the room, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of wrongdoing. Jack could feel the tension in the air. He knew that they were looking for a reason to take him down. Finally, one of the men spoke up. "We have reason to believe that you've been working against Salvador's organization." Jack shook his head, his heart racing. "That's not true." The woman stepped forward, her voice firm. "He's been helping me. My husband owes money to a rival of Salvador's, and Jack's been trying to help us out." The men exchanged a look, and Jack knew that he had to act fast. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a gun, pointing it at Salvador's men. "Get out of my office," he said, his voice low and threatening. "And don't come back." The men hesitated for a moment, but then they turned and left, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. Jack let out a sigh of relief and turned to face the woman. "Are you okay?" She nodded, a small smile crossing her lips. "Thank you, Jack. You saved my life." Jack knew that he had put himself in even more danger by going against Salvatore's men, but he couldn't ignore the feeling of satisfaction that came with helping this woman. "I'll keep you and your husband safe," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I promise." And with that, Jack knew that he had a new mission to protect the woman at all costs, no matter what it took.